Certainly is. I'll pause it up right now.
You post it. We haven't finished yet. We haven't started.
I'll pause it. I'll pause it.
Richard's recording. So anyway, let's start because I will let people in as they come, as they ask. But first, a couple things. I thought we would just go around the screen and because not everybody knows everyone, and just say who we are and just a little bit why you're here, what your expertise is, what your interests are. And members of the public do not have to comment about who they are, but they can. Feel free. So let's just start. We can go with Ingrid.
Okay, great. Thanks, Gordon. So I'm Ingrid Allen, and I teach and do research on housing policy, and longtime resident of Cornwall. I live down the street from Gordon on Town Street. I'm happy to be here.
Great. Thank you, Ingrid. Pam?
Well, my family had a weekend summer home in Lakeville, so I've been up around here my entire life. And I have lived in Cougar Village for 3 years. And prior to becoming disabled, I was a low-income housing manager. So I am very much an advocate of affordable housing.
Great. Great to have you on, Pam. Priscilla? Hello. Priscilla? Hello. You're muted, though. Priscilla, you're muted.
Now, am I okay?
All good.
Yeah.
Yes.
Good. I'm delighted to be on this committee, and I'm glad the previous person mentioned Cougar Village, because I was going to say the two things I would like us to achieve is another Cougar Village and another Bonnybrook. I think that Cornwall desperately needs affordable housing for who I refer to as the real people.
Okay. Let's see. Also on the committee is Jessica Brackman. Jessica.
My phone is ringing. Ignore that. It'll stop. I'm Jessica Brackman. I'm really happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me. I've been a longtime resident of Cornwall, though only full-time the last couple of years since the beginning of the pandemic. I've wanted to get involved in this committee because I love Cornwall and I love its diversity and would like to help that continue to thrive. I'm a social worker and life coach, and that's pretty much my background.
Great. Olivia.
Hi, everyone. So I'm Livia Corridor. I've had a house in Cornwall now for about 20 years, still as a commuter. I'm hoping to retire full-time soon, but it hasn't quite happened yet, but I'm hoping. And as a result, I'd like to get more involved in the community. And housing is something that's, affordable housing is a passion of mine. I am a lawyer. I'm a real estate lawyer, and I've worked in-house for a real estate development company for many years, for almost 15 years now. And we built affordable housing, but it was in Brooklyn, New York. So I'm sure it's different in Cornwall, but I'm just really eager to see what we can accomplish here in Cornwall. And I'm very excited to be, again, I want to be more involved in the community, and I'm really excited to meet all of you.
Great. Thank you for offering. And Ella? I think you're still muted, Ella.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, good. I love the fact that so many people of different persuasions and expertise are on this committee. I live in Cornwall and up the street from Gordon, and am very interested in affordable housing. I'm on the board for Bonnybrook And I look forward to replicating either it and or Cougar Village. I think that's a great idea.
Great, thank you. And Margaret Cooley, up the street, over the hill.
Hi. I just got on gallery view for the first time. It's just such a thrill to see everybody. Anyway, I'm here because of being on Cornwall Housing Corporation, as Ella has been in the past as well. And so obviously that's my interest.
Great. And also, Jill's here.
Yes.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Jill Cutler. I've been coming to Cornwall since 1973, actually, but I've been a full-time resident since about 2012. And the minute I became a full-time resident, I was kind of snared for the Planning and Zoning Commission, and I was on it until I resigned last year for health reasons. I've always been interested in housing, and I bring this sort of planning and zoning perspective to this, which I'm afraid isn't very useful for us, but maybe we can figure out something to do.
I'm sure. Great, yes, and I would like to hear from the public. I think I've got everybody checked off that's on the committee, but I would like to hear from the public at the end of the meeting, only because we have our featured speaker today, Jocelyn Eyre, is going to give us an introduction to some of her work along the two topics that we're really focusing in on, and that is working on some sort of community funding vehicle for housing, and also a housing advocacy position or organization. And Jocelyn has been a housing advocate and been central to doing a lot of housing efforts in the region, and now is branched out to do exclusively that. So we are very lucky to have her. And not only did she come with her knowledge, she comes with a $4,000 or $5,000 grant that we have to implement our work. So we've never had the ability to attract an expert who actually has money attached to them. Usually it costs us money. So anyway, Jocelyn, please take it away. I know she's got to leave for another appointment at a certain time. So please take it away.
Thank you, Gordon. So nice to see so many of you who I've worked with in the past on many other projects. Jill, great to see you. Maggie, Ella. So I just threw some slides together to kind of introduce myself and what I hope to be able to bring in terms of assistance to this committee. And if you don't mind, as I mentioned, I'm kind of a slide girl. So it just helps me kind of organize my thoughts, and I'm happy to share these with you guys afterwards. I'm going to sort of go through them real quick. As Gordon mentioned, I have a new hat on now with the region. I am director of the new Center for Housing Opportunity in Litchfield County. And basically what we're trying to do is coordinate a regional response. This is obviously housing affordability is a regional challenge. It's frankly a national challenge and a statewide challenge, but as we know, so many of us live in one town, work or grocery shop or go to restaurants in another town. So we really do have to think about this regionally and how we can work together, bringing together the private sector and the public sector and all of our partners, including the state, together to focus on specific strategies that we can carry out together. So that's just a little background. And if you want to know more kind of about what we do at the center, we do have a website, cthousingopportunity.org. And you can click on Litchfield County. There's also a center in Fairfield County, just to learn a little bit more about what we do. One of the things that we're doing, again, getting back to why you're all here, is to help implement the town's housing plan. I worked with 6 towns last year to create and adopt their housing plans. I'm actually working with all 9 of these towns now, which is why I have to go in a few minutes because I have 9 regular monthly night meetings with all of these towns to help them create and adopt their housing plans. But again, the great thing is going to be that once we're all done with our housing plans, I think there's a lot of strategies that we can, again, that will be common, that we can learn from each other in terms of what other towns are doing or have done, and also advocate for state resources, collectively to get the things done from each of our housing plans. So I just wanted to mention that. And also just, again, by way of a little more background about where I come from, I've sort of been involved in all different stages of housing development throughout the last 20 years. My first job was as a AmeriCorps Vista with the Habitat for Humanity. So we were building houses and getting volunteers to build houses. Then I was in affordable housing finance for a little while, went back to graduate school for to get into planning and land use. And then for the last 14 years, worked for the Council of Governments on that side of things, but also got a chance to work with the Regional Housing Council and the Cornwall Housing Corporation as a member of that group, as well as many of the other local nonprofit housing organizations. So getting a chance to work with them, and again, really seeing how it's done here, how Cougamans and Bonnybrooks actually get built on the ground over the last 14 years. So Gordon mentioned that the Litchfield County Center for Housing Opportunity got a grant from the Foundation for Community Health, which some of you might be familiar with. It's not too far from you. Their offices are in Sharon. But they provided funding so that we can grant out to all of you to help with the community engagement side of things. We are providing this grant to 5 towns, which are mentioned here. And more specifically, in terms of Cornwall, what Gordon and I have talked about is a $4,000 grant. I'm hoping to get those award letters out soon. But again, to help this committee kind of research what other towns are doing, organize that information, and then present it to the wider community, to get community feedback and hopefully support with moving forward on those, those strategies that you want to employ once you've been able to do a little bit more research on them. This money is pretty flexible, again, as long as it's related to helping the town implement its housing plan and engaging the community as a whole in that conversation. And again, some of the other mini grants and what they're doing might also help this committee. And I think that all of us can learn from what others are doing in the other towns. What I did quickly here, this is directly from your, Cornwall's housing plan. These are the 3 strategies that I think are maybe most relevant from your housing plan related to what I think Gordon wanted me to talk about mostly. This concept of potentially having a commission that would help administer a housing trust fund, establishing a housing trust fund, potentially for down payment assistance, or housing rehabilitation. And so what I wanted to talk with you all about today specifically is some examples we can explore. And I just sort of want to introduce them to you tonight. And then what I can do is I can send the committee materials on some of these. And I'm happy to join you for one or more future meetings to talk about them in more detail and answer your questions about them. But just a few examples. I mean, my big question for this group will be exactly what do you want to accomplish with a housing fund? Because there are many examples that we can point to, again, depending on what specifically you want to achieve with the fund. A few examples: the town of Salisbury, where I live, adopted an ordinance back in 2010 that I can share with all of you. It established this housing fund. I can also share with you the guidelines for the use of that fund. It is administered by the Salisbury Affordable Housing Commission. That's a Board of Selectmen appointed commission that has several roles in terms of both administering this fund, but also more broadly advocating for really the implementation of Salisbury's housing plan and supporting Salisbury's housing organizations, including the Salisbury Housing Trust and the Salisbury Housing Committee. I've actually been both a volunteer board member on the Salisbury Affordable Housing Commission, and at one time before I was a volunteer on it, I helped staff it. So again, I'm happy to share with you as this committee moves forward, kind of how that has gone, some case studies and examples, answer your questions about that. In Washington, Connecticut, they also have an affordable housing fund, which was actually funded by the town, as Salisbury's is. It has been used, majority of it has been used for a down payment assistance program, but it can be used for other things. And in Washington, they do have a Washington Housing Commission that is responsible for, again, administering that affordable housing fund. In Goshen, they have a land acquisition fund. It has not been used to date to acquire land for affordable housing, but it could be in theory, and it's another model that you could look at. That fund is funded by a portion of the conveyance fees that people have to pay when title is transferred to, for a property. So that's something else we could look at in terms of an example, in terms of, how a fund can be funded. And you could have obviously a variety of different methods for funding your housing fund. It could be, again, it could be town funded. It could be the conveyance fee. It could be open for private donations. I will mention that I just saw the Greenwich, Connecticut, which is not too similar to Cornwall, but is in the same state as Cornwall, has recently established a housing fund. Somehow it expects to be completely funded by private donations. Maybe that works in Greenwich, I don't know. But anyway, there's an ordinance there. There's a whole list of frequently asked questions about their ordinance. I can provide all of that to you all to look at if you're interested in that example. And then I also saw in your housing plan this idea of having funds available for folks who can't afford to make repairs to their homes, to be able to do so. As you might know, we did have that kind of fund available a while back through a small cities funded program that the town of Salisbury sponsored, but that many towns were eligible for it. So something like that could also be revisited. That would likely be the town applying potentially in a future round of the small cities CDBG fund to fund a housing rehab revolving loan fund. If the state is open to those right now, the state Department of Housing is saying that they are not funding those in this current round of small cities. But again, it could be something that you could explore in terms of potentially doing in the future, you know, assuming that Department of Housing, you know, revives that eligible use of small cities money. So I just, again, I for tonight, because we had such a short time and I know you guys want to talk about other things as well, I just wanted to sort of kind of introduce the committee to these different examples. And, you know, I mean, I guess sort of get some initial feedback from you about how I can be helpful in terms of providing examples and or again, bringing more information to a future meeting, or again, just being available to answer your questions. So I'm going to stop sharing those slides. That's all the slides I have.
Yeah, so that sounds like a great start, Jocelyn. And I think what might be helpful is just for you to send us some of that background stuff, and some people will wade through it and some people will not. But I mean, I could see combining all those, because I think that the challenges are so much greater than when we built Cougar and Bonnybrook, just as even access to land now. So I could see trying to, you know, check a lot of boxes. And, you know, I think basically what we're looking at for the fund is something that would use private, and I mean, because we pulled off Bonnybrook, I believe there was some private funding to acquire the land. And, you know, there's, you know, so there has been a history of people, you know, giving money or whatever. And I think my thought is this fund would assist the Cornwall Housing Corporation. We don't want a competitive process. We don't want a competitive group. We don't want to have too many committees all, you know, working at cross purposes. But there's enough to do with administrating housing once it's built that there could be an avenue for this housing commission to be like a funding arm, which is what I thought was sort of see happening. And there may be people that can, you know, access money from places that we haven't thought of. And there may be a role for, you know, we have talked about using some of our limited ARPA money towards housing. So there may be, again, there may be some unusual sources that we can track down that the Housing Corporation may not have time to do. So I think I wouldn't rule out anybody's good ideas at this time, even Greenwich. If they've got a good idea, we can steal it or use it or modify it. But again, that whole thing of maybe having an acquisition fund that would be funded partially by conveyance fees, I think that's something we could consider also. And maybe the time has come for the town to put it aside, get some vehicle somehow that automatically some amount every year goes towards an acquisition fund at this point, because it's hard to build anything without the land underneath the building. So those are my thoughts, is not to rule out anybody's good ideas at this point, but let's have some more details to wade through. And I think especially it's good not being the first in some of these things and having some case studies from Washington or wherever where they can say, this is what we did and it worked. This is what we did and it was a disaster. So, or maybe they had all good luck or experiences. So anyway, that's my quick thought. Anybody else thoughts, different thoughts? Yes, Pam?
I have a question.
Oh,
Go ahead, Ella.
Okay, I have a question about Salisbury and perhaps other towns as well. In Salisbury, they have a number of very old funds that went for various things, whether it was health or housing. And I've forgotten what the name of one of them was, but it was a privately funded thing. How does that work with the Salisbury Housing Organization that now exists?
Well, you might be referring to the McChesney Fund.
Bissell? Or McChesney, yeah.
McChesney, so that's a fund of the Salisbury Family Services, which, as you know, is a separate nonprofit, but very much works with the town. That continues, the McChesney Fund continues to exist and assists as well. As Gordon said, and I agree, there's so much need out there that as many funds as you can have available. But the Salisbury Affordable Housing Commission, which administers, and I'm sorry about all of these words, but the Salisbury Housing Fund, it does different things than the McChesney Fund. I'm happy, again, I'm happy to come to another meeting. I do actually have to jump off and go to a 5:30 Sharon Housing Plan Steering Committee meeting. But again, I'm happy to meet with this group again. I will try to send you some stuff that's organized in a way that's easy to understand before your next meeting, assuming it's at least a month from now. And all I will say is I'm happy to come to another meeting to explain or summarize some of it for you. But I do have kind of a difficult night meeting schedule. So, maybe Gordon, you could check in with me, or we might have to make a special meeting or something. So I can be there to answer your questions.
Sure.
Okay.
Okay, great. Thank you, Jocelyn, for fitting us in. And I think that's a good start. Anybody else have a quick comment for Jocelyn before she goes?
I'll also just say real quick, my email is jocelyn@thehousingcollective.org. If there's something specific that you definitely want to see at the next meeting or some other question that you have that you'd like to have addressed, feel free to send me an email about what your specific question is or what you would really like to get before the next meeting.
Sure, and I'll relay comments to you also, Jocelyn.
Okay, terrific.
We have some brainstorms here. Great.
All right. Thanks so
Thank
much.
you.
Nice to
Thank
meet
you.
some of you.
Good stuff.
Nice to see others. Bye.
Bye-bye.
All right, so.
Yes.
quick
So, yeah, Pam.
Can we get a copy of the town's new housing plan?
Yeah, I believe we actually have on the website, there's
Yeah,
a,
it's on the website now. I just looked it up. It's
Perfect.
if you look under boards and, yeah, it's there.
Okay.
I just
It's under-
Googled Cornwall Affordable Housing Plan and it came up, so.
Well, there you go. So, and we have our own little section under town boards and commissions. It's Cornwall Housing Plan, I think. Yes, so that's very good question. We try to stick to our manual when we can. So any thoughts, reflection on Jocelyn? I mean, between you and me, I'm going to be relying on her. I'm not going to be making a lot of phone calls to ask all these towns if, again, that's one of the advantages of having regional cooperation and having this new group show up, is to have somebody that's worked in the different places. I'm sure there are people here that have friends that have been working on some of these efforts. And if you have individual experiences, that's all good also. But I think having her have the ability to pull some of this information together into a useful document is great. Any particular comments on what she threw out there other than we need to continue the discussion, I think?
Yeah.
Meg?
Ingrid?
You go first,
Ingrid
Maggie, then
want to
I'll go after you.
Okay. My main curiosity about getting info from Jocelyn from other towns' experiences is about how to get usable info and how to establish some way of getting funding, overseeing funding, rerouting funding without necessarily having to create a proliferation of boards and commissions, just because, you know, we're a smaller town than Salisbury, and we don't want to run out of people to be on these boards. But we want the maximum number of people contributing that have an interest and a skill. But you know, the Housing Corporation doesn't feel worried about competition or anything like that, because whoever wants to build housing is welcome to do it. But it would be nice to have a really clear idea of who's going to select whatever board administers the funding, and what kind of restrictions they're under. I mean, because of the examples that Jocelyn gave, these often are towns which did commendable job at reserving funds, but then couldn't figure out how to peaceably release them to create housing. And that's just so disappointing. Anyway, so I hope we can keep exploring that.
I would agree with that we do not want to have a proliferation of meetings, of commissions. If there is, and we certainly want to have people working on a unified platform. So I think those are all things to keep in mind. And as I said earlier, that when there has been a large housing effort, I believe there was substantial money or donations raised or bequeathed, left to the Housing Corporation. So it wasn't all government grants. So obviously the Housing Corporation has raised money, has gotten money, has used money, is set up as a you know, tax deductible entity, has a track record, has, you know, whatever. So I think that's something to bear in mind. The thought I had was this is to augment the efforts that we have so far, and not to duplicate in any way, and certainly not to compete in any way. But if there is a way to take on a new thing as far as funding, then I mean, well, I think we'll get there, but maybe that needs to be laid out, that the funds are to be used by the Housing Corporation, or, you know, another, you know, if Habitat wants to do something or whatever, this is what the funds are for. The funds are not that we want to create a bank account and have a $500,000 fund. We want to raise money and put that money or land to use. And I believe also the other thing is that the Housing Corporation already does have some land given to them and some lots that need to be developed. And again, we want to hear how this might help that come to pass. I think so. That's why I hear Ingrid. Oh,
so I mean, first, I guess I had a very similar set of questions to Maggie, is just sort of understanding kind of the institutional arrangements. I think would be really helpful. I'm also very curious about the conveyance fee and sort of how that works, and whether, anyway, how that works. Let me just leave it there. I think we left it pretty open, I think, in the plan on kind of what this revolving loan fund would be, or the housing trust fund, I guess we called it. But my understanding was that it was we talked less about development, thinking that those funds would go to the Housing Corporation, and this was more about kind of helping people afford housing. And so it was more about down payment assistance and low interest loans or grants for renovations to help people age in place. So I'm not saying that that's where we should end it, but I think that's how I understood it to be sort of distinct from the work that the Housing Corporation is doing. Not that the Housing Corporation doesn't also need more funding and should get more funding, but in this group could help with that. But I thought the trust fund was more, anyway, the way we talked about it was more kind of on the demand side.
I think we have to be careful because what you're talking about, Ingrid, is really what we've kind of been describing as attainable housing.
Yeah.
And we really need to be sure that we try to fulfill our, is it statutory? I'm not sure, but our obligations to provide a certain number of affordable housing units.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to, I mean, I think a lot of the sort of private money might well be used, for example, for the parcel program, where we have some land already. And if we had the people who could afford to get a mortgage, could be helped to get a mortgage, then they could build a house. But we still need Cougaman Village and Bonnybrook are not that, though they are really affordable housing, and we really need that.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%.
And they're always less attractive, if you know what I mean. They're less attractive to investors, but we need them. We got to have them.
Okay. Any other thoughts, comments? I think again we're at the early stages, and it would be good. I mean, it's hard to tell how, what are the sources and how much money we talking about, and again, how much we can raise, could be raised, how much grants are out there. I know it's a long process that I believe some of the projects that have been on the books for a while have just gotten some funding in other towns, but it's a while. So, and my thought overall, as I said before, is that with the current real estate market being so tight and so very little land for sale, that that is another whole part of things, that the idea of a land acquisition fund. I mean, we have get some sort of land bank or whatever going, so and maybe these things don't happen immediately, but trying to raise money so at least some percentage of the town goes towards this. The town owns very little land itself. The housing corporation owns less, and there's a lot of pressure to either go to high end or just the state's buying up hundreds of acres to do their thing. So anyway, further thoughts on Jocelyn's presentation? And again, I think we're at the beginning stages. One thing to take a step back, I'm willing to be, I'm not a member of the committee, but I talk a lot, and I'm willing to be sort of an ex officio chair and secretary of this. If anybody else wishes to chair the meetings or take minutes, I'm glad to hand those roles over. The only thing I can also offer is that I can expedite the publicity and the minute taking and whatever else needs to happen as far as that goes. So
that's great.
Does that work for people?
Yeah.
Thank you, Gordon.
Yes.
Okay.
So
Anyway,
I'm just wondering, and I know Heather isn't with us.
right.
How are we, I think it's critical for us to kind of work with social services as well, because Cougaman is moderate income housing, and I know that some people here struggle with their rent sometimes, and that might be something that we look into.
Yes. Again, we'll work on trying to find a better time. As it turns out, Heather had some other obligations at this time of day, so we're sort of balancing out, everybody's busy schedules and things. But certainly that is part of the equation, and I know that is, Heather has a serious caseload, and making sure that the pressure that people are under that gets addressed as part of our efforts too.
I have a question. I'm sorry, I
Yeah.
haven't read the plan, so I will read that, but what are our goals here? Are we trying to build affordable housing? Are we trying to give people money for their own home? Are there just a lot of different goals going on?
No, we're actually, this committee is their goals are fairly specific. We had another committee that actually came up with this housing plan, which is separate. The town also does have two other housing corporations, the Cornwall Housing Corporation, which actually developed Cougar Village, and there's another housing corporation called the Connecticut Senior, or the Cornwall Senior Housing Corporation, I think, that Ella is on, or something approximate to that, that oversees the operation of our senior housing at Bonnybrook and Cornwall Bridge. So this group itself, two of the, seemed like the next step out of the housing plan was to try to work on getting some sort of funding vehicle together so that people that have plans that we get some local funding vehicle. So the thought is to look at some, I mean, Cornwall is ahead of some towns as far as the amount of housing that we've constructed. But the challenges have increased as far as competition for housing dollars from government sources, and the price of land and building materials has also increased probably more. So the challenges have increased. So I guess what we're looking at is specifically 2 points that the Board of Selectmen were tasked with that we cannot do because they're more complicated than either our skill set or our meeting time allows for, and that is to research some sort of funding vehicle that other towns have come up with to either fundraise for housing or obtain grants to support the work that's already been done and to do more work. And the second thing is to investigate having what's called a housing advocate, which would be a certain person that would work with Heather on housing issues, because we're again met this morning with Heather in the ARPA funding group, and one thing we're getting the word out that the reality of what's happening right here and now this week in our town is that the need for public assistance in the Food and Fuel Fund has increased. It hasn't decreased since the pandemic started. It's increased. But the federal funding, the support of people is going away or has gone away. So the local need is greater. And of course, because people want to get beyond COVID and are thinking about other issues now, our donations to our Food and Fuel Fund have actually declined recently over what they were at the height of the pandemic. So, that's where we're at. And Heather's very clear about that. And we are going to, again, continue to raise money for the Food and Fuel Fund. We've been very fortunate to be able to raise about $100,000 a year for the last several years. And that has been, money that's been dispersed to support people in very necessary ways. So this is not the Food and Fuel Fund board, but this is, again, those two particular things, because again, we're trying to stay focused and not reinvent the wheel, but again, support the organizations that are out there and trying to move these points, which this previous plan committee, wrestled with what do we need to do next. And those seem to be two practical steps that we could implement and would really help us get to where we want to be, as opposed to just planning, but actually funding and getting some more options out there. So I hope that's clear. So there is this little section on the website that says Cornwall Housing Plan or whatever. And if you look through that, you can see the planning group, and also I believe Richard recorded some of their meetings. So we had 60 people come to some of our hearings. So we had a lot of input, a lot of support, a lot of questions, a lot of ideas, trying to channel those ideas into results. That's us. Mag, hand up.
I just wanted to say for Olivia, the last 4 or 5 pages of the plan is where what we're talking about is.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if I can just
Yeah.
say, it is sort of the last, it goes through the goals and the strategies, and so that's really, but I think it would be useful to sort of to talk through maybe at the next meeting to kind of think about prioritizing kind of what our or at least where we should be starting. I mean, there is a lot. There's a lot in that.
There's a lot. So I guess that's
There's a lot to be done, and I'm not saying I'm game to be ambitious, but I think we should just think about.
And again, the name of this group is implementing the plan. We had got the plan. Now, how do you implement it and really make it work in a way, as we said, to be complementary to the ongoing efforts that are out there right now? As I said, we have a need for rental assistance. We have a need to develop more housing. We have some land that is sitting ready to be built on, engineered, but again, systems to be installed, and a tough market for building materials. One of the comments that came up too is really congregate housing is much more resource and cost effective than individual housing. So that's if anything, that math has gotten more has gotten stronger over the last couple of years in a bunch of different directions. Any other thoughts, Jessica? Yes.
It's helpful to you've sort of broken things down into 2 very distinct categories. And I think some of us have more expertise in some areas. I don't at all in funding, and I do in sort of the social services side of things. So maybe we can begin to make some categories of where people might contribute or focus or research.
Right. Yeah, and I will, and I'm sorry Heather's not here, but I will fill her in, and I'm sure she'll watch this video, but that might be even us definitely a part of next time's thing is to get a report from her on rental assistance and thoughts of housing advocacy, Cornwall style. What does that mean? How might that work? I mean, my goal was just to get everybody together to talk to Jocelyn a little bit and to introduce some new people to the group. And so, and I'm glad to keep talking. Or any other thoughts from the committee? Yes, Jill.
Well, I think it would be good if we all, when we got Jocelyn's material, wrote down the questions and thoughts that we each had. And then if those could be circulated before the next meeting, then we might have some sense of what we need to figure out and where this information is going to go.
Right.
We're going to go to the housing corp. Are we going to try to set up our own fund? What are we going to do with it? So just a thought. I mean, it's easy enough for all of us to do that before the next meeting.
Yeah, I think especially if people have comments, we can share those. What we can't do is we can't talk back and forth amongst each other because this is a public group agency or whatever. But if somebody says, yes, this makes a lot of sense, we should do Washington's Plan B for these reasons, it might work, that would be good. Or if Jill wants to say, I've read this, these are the questions I'm going to ask, and we're all smarter when we know the questions ahead of time. So I think that's a great idea.
I think I was really suggesting that all the questions should go to one place. And
Well, I think,
everybody should get them all before the next meeting. You know what I mean?
okay. Yeah, you can send them to us and we can send them on to Jocelyn. We can send it CWL Selectmen. Just say housing questions, next meeting thoughts, and we can, I think you have everybody else's email if you want to send them out simultaneously. We'll do that.
And we do reply. Can we do that? Can we do, if we have
So-
questions, can we? I don't think we can. I think we have to send them to you.
Yeah, if you just send, these are my questions, we can send them out to people. We can't go back and forth and say, oh, the answer, I can't answer Jill's question.
Right, and I'm not asking you to.
Yeah, but I think again, if something, or if there's any thoughts ahead of that, we certainly can say my thoughts going into the meeting are this one might work, or this is never gonna happen.
Yeah,
This is too expensive, this is gonna require too much legwork. But again, I think if we can do that, reflecting on what other towns have done and reflecting on our plans, it's a little open on where we wind up, but we do want to pay attention to where we thought we were going.
Yeah.
Because I think it has worked in other places, and I've had people tell me that they would donate to a housing fund if it was well publicized and circulated. So I mean, and I have no idea what that means, but you know, I think getting something again and tying into this thing, we do have this grant for implementation or community engagement, which I think is a big part of this for potential recipients or potential donors or whatever. There's a bunch of explanation, or again, just having is this one thing we're working on, is trying to get a update of what are the needs of the town at this point in time in the Chronicle article or whatever, just giving that summary that I said, or Heather will say it better, so I have her write it, but where
I
we're
think
at.
that getting the stuff that Jocelyn outlined on one of her slides, being able to see all that would be very helpful before we met again.
Yeah. Great. So, and again, I'll reach out to people because I know this was not a good, as it turned out, a good time for Heather. So we may have to do another, a time slot, but we'll work on trying to get what makes the most sense to people. And hearing that Jocelyn's working with 9 towns is a lot, but we'll try to see what works. If there's another day, it sort of seemed that a lot of people, well, a number of us are tapped out at night. This odd, the end of the day before dinner time seems like that works as well as anything works, but let's make sure about that.
And I just understand, so we're going to get
Yeah.
materials and we're going to come up with questions and we're going to send them to you or to the whole group?
Either you can, but you can send them to me. Why don't you send them to me and I'll send them on to Jocelyn. And if there's to be clear, because Jocelyn is not a town official, if there's something that triggers a thought with you and you want her to clarify, giving her enough time to answer the question, you feel free to go back and forth with her. But what we can't do is meet offline, online as a group and come up with all these great ideas, and all of a sudden we've decided everything in a non-public setting. So, but
I think we can't even do a joint email. I think it has to be funneled through Jocelyn or you.
I think it has to be funneled through Gordon.
Right.
Yeah, so if I just give it to me and I'll send it out, so it'll be fine.
Yeah, because Jocelyn's not an official member of,
Yeah.
Right. Great. So, anything else from the committee? Any thoughts? And I'll check back in with Jocelyn. And so the 2 thoughts is, again, read her reports and read the plan. We'll try to meet in about a month's time. And are there any comments, thoughts from our public attendees? Richard,
Yes, I think it'd be great to reach out to Ron Goldstein from National Iron Bank. He
Yeah,
might even be good to be on your committee, because you never know. And that's local business, and he's also lives in Cornwall.
yeah. I know that one thing that Norfolk did do, there's some sort of fund through the National Iron Bank in Norfolk. I think we will take a look at how that works and talk to Ron. I think as if we do adopt something separate, we have to have some separation from a potential relationship there. But I think that is one thing that we will look into as far as how what worked in Norfolk.
Great.
Yeah, I
Okay.
think he mentioned it actually. Didn't he mention it at one of our meetings?
Right.
Yes.
He's helped us. He has a conflict of interest. The bank says he has a conflict of interest in getting too closely allied with groups that may ask them for
That's right.
funding.
I don't think he can
Yeah.
be on the committee.
Right. But we can
Maybe too close, right?
talk to Norfolk about how it worked for Norfolk, and then we'll get to that point. Yes, Lila.
Well, I wanted everyone to know, you probably don't know, that this year's annual Towns and Villages supplement from the Lakeville Journal is themed around affordable housing and what each town is doing about it. So for Cornwall, I'll be writing up, this meeting and different impressions so that I might be calling one or another committee member to get, if I need a detail or I need an impression. So just so you know that will be the theme of this year's Towns and Villages supplement, will be what each area town is doing about and where they stand on their affordable housing progress.
Great. And when do you hope that would come out?
Well, that's not my doing. It's not written yet. So probably a month or so.
Yeah.
I would guess.
May, somewhere in there. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe.
Great. Good. Very timely.
Right.
Great. Any other comments? I don't think I can see.
I have a question.
Oh, yep. Hi, Nancy. Yes.
Hi. It's just clarification of a statement you made, because this does come in competition with all housing in Cornwall, not just affordable housing. But when you said the state is buying up land, and you said for its own purposes, and I imagine that is for conservation. I don't know what their purposes are, but I did notice that since we've moved here 2 years ago, they bought over 500 acres that connect to the Mohawk Forest, State Park and Forest in that part of Cornwall. And I just wonder, is this for more conservation?
Yeah, I perhaps misspoke because it is a public purpose. It is for expanding state forests.
Okay.
And they're looking at, at least several hundred acres more. And what's odd, as we said before, is there's a big emphasis on that, but there is no state program to work to fund local buying of land for housing, other than through a
Because
fairly
that
competitive
takes land.
program.
There is something in the plan in the state and local cooperation section that addresses the possibility of talking the state into maybe disgorging tiny bits of what they own to be used for housing.
Yes.
When
So
you
is that clear?
500 acres or more off the tax rolls, that affects everybody.
Right. All we want is a little piece of that 500
I
acres.
know.
I mean, at this little, very small piece, 10%. I'll take 5%. Whatever. Anyway, so that's a long-term issue that we're continue to work on. But and again, I don't want to disparage another important goal, but we try to get balance as opposed to imbalance. So, in just my opinion, yes, Beth.
I just
Hello.
wanted to introduce myself. Good to see people or meet people, as the case might be. My name is Beth O'Donnell and I own property on Cogswell Road. I grew up in Cornwall and Lakeville, and I work in affordable housing in Boston, development, finance, politics, the whole spectrum. And I wasn't able to attend most of the planning meetings, but I did watch the recordings, and it's been really interesting to see this, and it's fun to see it reach the implementation stage. I think I'm a third generation introvert, so I might observe a lot and not participate a lot, but it doesn't mean I don't have a lot to say. So sorry about that. I just wanted to say something, if I may, about the fund that was being discussed. And one way that I've seen that kind of fund be used really effectively is simply to subsidize for sale housing. So if it costs 500,000 to build it and you want to sell it for 350, you need to come up with 150,000 somewhere, somehow. So that's a really effective use of funds like the one we were just discussing. Thank you.
Thank you, Beth, for checking in. And again, anyone, especially someone with expertise, if you have anything to tell us, please do. Send that also to my email, and that can be dispersed to the committee, where we have no monopoly on this. So whatever, points, again, if you're in nearby Massachusetts, there's, some states are way ahead of Connecticut. Some states are way behind Connecticut. Each place is a little bit different, but each place is similar too. So whatever we can do, we're always in favor of sharing other people's good ideas, good stories. So thank you. Any other comments, thoughts? All right, thank you very much. Glad to know we'll be in print. We'll be famous in the Lakeville Journal. And again,
We'll be on the website too.
We'll be on the
Thank you,
website.
Richard.
Don't forget the website. Yeah, we'll be digital. We'll be in print. But again, some of these things and conversations will spawn other people's interest. And I think there is real concern in the community on tackling this. So again, getting down to the implementation stage, I think is really important, really good. Okay, so we will talk again soon. And I will be talking to Jocelyn about what you missed, and we'll appreciate everybody's efforts, and we'll be in touch soon about what's a good time to meet next time. Okay. All right. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Yep.
Bye.
Take care. Yep. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Knowing when your turn's off.